Hello everyone, Loremaster of Sotek here, and today I'd like to share a particular story with you all. See, recently Creative Assembly approached me and asked if I would be interested in doing a video talking about my favorite piece of Total War content. So, real quick, thanks to my good pals over at CA for sponsoring this video, and let's dive into talking about a piece of content that's incredibly important to me. When news first broke back in the day that Total War Warhammer was going to be made, I was incredibly excited. For years, I had enjoyed other Total War games, and it had always been my dream for them to take on the task of bringing the Warhammer fantasy universe to life. While I, of course, was eager to see each and every fragment of Warhammer in this new frontier, there was always one character, one showdown, that stood above all others as my most anticipated release. I think this is finally the perfect opportunity to talk about why my most beloved piece of content is the Prophet and the Warlock. Now, I'm sure this may actually come as a slight shock to most people, as I'm notoriously critical of this particular DLC and frequently discuss various tweaks that I feel need to be done to it. This is not because I dislike it, but rather I love it so much that any tiny little flaw stands out to me like an immense issue. Kind of like how if someone alters your favorite home-cooked meal, it's still your favorite dish and a really good meal, but every little change from the way you're expecting to enjoy it will still stick out like a sore thumb. With that little disclaimer out of the way, I want to share with you why exactly I consider it my personal favorite. To get the most obvious things out of the way, first of all, there's this thing. But from an overall perspective, this is hands down the most important Lord Pack DLC in the entirety of the Total War Warhammer franchise so far, just due to how absurdly grand even the Skaven side is. From Claw's flawless interpretation and hilarious but completely unnecessary addition of a jetpack, to easily the most anticipated units in the wider community with the Jezzails and Rattling guns, this thing is just stuffed. And that's not even mentioning the god-tier power fantasy granted to players by the Clan Skryre Workshop. These features alone make this DLC one of the best, at least as far as I'm concerned. But that's actually not what I want to talk about. That's just stuff I need to quickly mention so that I can get to the bit I had been waiting for since Total War Warhammer was first announced and released. A character who I had loved and wanted, nay, needed to see brought to life ever since I was only 12 years old. The Prophet of Sotek. To run off topic for a quick minute, back in the grand old year of 2004, Games Workshop released a campaign supplement for 6th edition Warhammer known as the Lustria campaign. To my young mind, this was easily the most amazing book ever released, and still is, as the Lizardmen were the headliners. The storyline featured around the War of the Serpent and the Rat, during which the Skaven of Clan Pestilence had reached ascendancy in Lustria and revealed themselves in all their diseased might. For over 1,000 years, they had been eating away at the roots of the jungle and carefully plotting to rise up and take over the continent. The Lizardmen were caught completely off guard as this new foe emerged from beneath them, using weapons never seen before in the form of grotesque and deadly plagues, the best remembered being the sinister yellow fever. The Slann were slow to react to this new threat, as they were to most, and so the Empire of the Old Ones teetered on the brink of collapse, as they were unable to respond properly to this threat. But then the hero arrived. The legendary skink priest named Tehinoan. As a Lizardman fan, this was beyond an amazing moment, as while the Prophet of Sotek had technically existed in earlier editions, he was a very mysterious entity with little narrative focus and no model or artwork. Heck, back in 5th edition, he was actually Teeny Huini, and in 6th edition, they made sure to say, oh, his name is now Teheniwan, but he is sometimes known as Teeny Huini, and thankfully they ditched that alter ego name in the Lustria expansion. But here he was, revealed to be an absolute badass skink, ripped with enough muscles to make a Saurus jealous. His design blew my mind, and I instantly fell in love with this lizard Moses, who had marched out in spite of disease and ruin to lead his people to war against those responsible, those hideous, disgusting vermin. While the Slann hid in their temple cities and deliberated the best course of action, Teheniwan charged into battle and challenged everything it was to be a skink, or even just a lizardman. Where the lizardmen were more akin to reptilian automatons, the prophet was a fiery orator who roused his kin to enraged calls for vengeance. Where the lizardmen were careful and slow to act, the prophet launched assault after assault, with each battle sending the Skaven reeling, with no time to breathe. Where the lizardmen were worshipping dead gods long since lost to time, the prophet unleashed so much ritualistic slaughter that he ushered in a new god, not only in a religious sense, but into the physical planes of reality. Where the lizardmen had lost much of the knowledge of the Old One's technology, the prophet vanished into the deep jungles and returned with an entire line of ancient stegodons, all bearing engines of the gods, even though they were known as Arcanodons back in the day. Teheniwan was a revolution, a complete rebirth to everything we readers understood about the lizardmen, and led them into a glorious new era. For the first time since the arrival of Chaos, the lizardmen would no longer tolerate being on the defensive. I could carry on talking about it, but I think that's enough to get my point across of why I was so insanely excited about the arrival of Teheniwan. The first time I got to enjoy seeing him animated and alive genuinely brought tears to my eyes, as stupid and silly as that sounds. That had been a meeting over a decade, almost 2 decades in the making. As a tabletop player, finally getting my hands on Ripperdactyls and Salamanders was a damn blessing, especially because they worked pretty close to how they were supposed to work. They really opened up the lizardman range, and I was finally able to be much more competitive in multiplayer because I had options on how to deal with many different kinds of threats, and I could catch opponents off guard with an Air Force or all sorts of other nasty, amazing things. But anyway, I think I've rambled enough about this whole thing, because this is kind of just meant to be a brief show-off of my favorite little thing. But I just wanted to share with you all a bit why the Prophet and the Warlock is my favorite piece of Total War content to ever arrive. At least so far. Even I know that I do give it a lot of grief, and I will continue to give it a lot of grief, but it's only because I genuinely love it, and it's everything I wanted it to be, and just so much more. So thanks again to Creative Assembly for sponsoring this video, and don't worry folks, I will be back to my usually bitter, overly critical self very soon. Thank you all so much for watching. I hope you have a wonderful day. Bye.